Welcome to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we have on a truly unique guest. Now, David Reid. And David, I'm going to say that because you hold the position in your company as Chief Technology Officer and Chief Marketing Officer. And I think you are a breed unto yourself. And you're at NOV, and I'm going to let you explain a little bit what NOV is, but you're a company that makes acquisitions like crazy. A dozen or so a year, 300, I think you said, over the lifetime of the company. So needless to say, your job as an integrator and the chief technology officer, but then as the chief marketing officer, you've got some additional challenges that good things, opportunities, right? You also have an incredible other side to you. You run a nonprofit with over 4,000 volunteers and do events all across the country. I'd love to just have you maybe give us a little bit more on your background before we get started. And when we do, we're going to be talking about adopting an entrepreneurial model for growth. You have a lot of thoughts on growth strategies and adopting that kind of a mindset.
Yeah, I'm not short of a thing to say. I mean, I've been in the company a long time, 33 years. I was not planning on that. That doesn't sound entrepreneurial, but it was a very small company and we're a large company of small companies. So we run a very different strategy across all of it. So I started in a repair shop. I actually was doing architecture and someone met me socially and they were an American in Scotland and they didn't know how to get their performance up with a Scottish crew. And I had actually studied the two cultures because the construction business in London was being led by the Americans. And so I was very interested in the difference of leadership style and business. So he had me come in to work with the repair shop and we managed to get performance way up. And there wasn't anything that I knew or understood in that space, but they were really great at recognizing strengths and helping you to work through that. And they were very advanced, I would have said, for a corporation. And so they spent a lot of time on psychology and how you think and who you are and how you work and things that people are learning now. 30 years ago, I was having those conversations with my bosses and they were very helpful at helping me identify what I like, what I want to do, which is why I have two odd titles, because these are things I like. I like to do it. So, I always tell my boss that the C in my title is for cheap because they don't pay me twice. So I'm a bargain.
I'd love to get into the bargain mindset here and start out, I think, with a really important question, because you talked about why most visionaries fail at, you put it this way, feeding their kids. And I just wanted to dive into that to get us started here.
Well, I think everyone fancies themselves a bit as a strategist or a long-term thinker. And some people really get in that groove and are able to have good long-term thinking. But the inability to take care of business now so you can exist is the feeding the kids thing that I usually say. So it's that in an American term, if you're used to the American way with children, you save up for college. And so good strategist is always saving up, knowing that my kids, I'm going to drive them towards a college life. And that's what I want out of them, but also forgets to feed them because the money is going into college. So that's often how the strategy is, and the kids won't make it. So people wonder why their great ideas don't happen. And sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's market. But most of all, it's having sustainability, having an ability to even portion off what you're doing and create enough revenue to exist. And that's really the difference between good and bad strategists, is people who understand that or understand it as a weakness and compensate for it so that you're always doing something that pays us now so that we can do the big stuff later. So it's kind of a split brain that you need.
It's really interesting. As part of this podcast, right, we interview C-suite executives all over the world. And we also ask them about their greatest challenges to creating long-term sustainable growth. And the balance between short-term and long-term was the number 3 challenge. And it feels a lot like what you're talking about right now.
I think your good operational people don't do the long-term. So the challenge is, someone just asked me this on innovation and how do you manage it? But they were asking, it was a breakfast this morning, how do you manage to keep knowing what's ahead? And I said, well, when you're wired that way, you're reading signals, you kind of know where it is. And the hard part is living long enough in your role to be able to deliver that and see it come around and being patient enough to do the steps that it takes to succeed and doing the things now, making sure, because I mean, the way it works in our world, I tend to be the more creative of the crowd. I think forward more, which is really annoying to my peers. And so I have to manage that. I have to balance it with, what now? Because everything that I did over the years was long term until it wasn't, until it turns into a business. And at that moment, everyone says they always loved it when you've lived through 10 years of them thinking it's a terrible idea until it's the best idea we ever had.
This podcast is going to be, I think, Mythbusters, right? It's like taking what we commonplace do and think and say and what we really should. And the second one under that, I just came up with that because I'm just thinking about the line of our questions and what we're doing here. The second one is what Silicon Valley, the story that nobody ever tells you.
Yeah. I mean, about what really goes on there.
Yes.
They're just stealing it from each other. But yeah, it's an interesting place. I started there in the 80s, so I was around a lot of people. That was their life. Not a great life, I don't think. I've never been a fan of the way it all works out there. But yeah, the realities of who's coming up with ideas and how they're coming up with ideas is pretty shocking out there. So a lot of light theft from each other, and they accept it. They know that's part of life, but it's a different model. And I quite like, because I've had people model me and say, you need to be in that environment. I'm like, why? They're unhappy people. I like being where there's a much healthier balance in a work environment. And so the energy business has been really good because it comes out of farming. It has that feel. You get a lot more balanced view, a lot more straight talk, a lot more pleasant environment to be in for collaboration and driving and making change. So I've really enjoyed it. I grew up in an oil town and I did not want to work in that business. But then I met the leadership of this company and they were way advanced for what you would expect in that environment. And so people focused that I was like, I really like this. And I get what you're trying to do. And I learned and led that way. So a lot of coaching, a lot of personal development. And so when you focus on that, when you focus on people and growing people, or at least creating an environment for them to grow, I wouldn't say anyone grows anyone, but you can create an environment. And if you do that work, then everything takes care of itself. If you're just helping people to see their weaknesses, understand them, understand their strengths, lean into your strengths, compensate for your weaknesses, you can get a lot done.
I do a podcast in the staffing and recruitment industry, and we talk a lot about the importance of a company culture, and that to get high performance teams, you've got to attract the right high performance teams, and then you've got to keep the right high performance teams, which is not easy.
I think I've had our HR team try and tell me that we're going to have weak players. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're not. We're going to have happy people. And if people are unhappy, we're going to find out what makes them happy, even if that means leaving or doing something else. But if I think great teams need to be around great players, you don't mix your weak and your strong to win championships. You just build the best team you can. And that's why that really working on the team is the whole game for doing things right. It's most of my energy in everything that I do is working with my leaders on how they're doing with their team and are they leading healthily and are people happy, and let them surprise you because people don't even know what their superpowers are. So you're trying to find them. And as you find them, people will surprise you. They can do amazing things they didn't even know they could do. So you're always trying to dig for that gold with people is what is the thing that really lights you up and makes you do things we couldn't imagine. So you're constantly creating an environment. And people stay because of that when you're focused on them. And a lot of my time is I have very driven people working for me. So are they taking vacations? Like it's really important to me. Because they're not going to thinking that there's some medal of honor for being unhealthy and unwell. So, people need the space for their brains to function properly. They need to learn from their families, which sometimes they're avoiding learning from their families or friends. They're not spending time with them. So those are places where really deep feedback is going to happen. And nobody wants to hear it, but those people know you better than anybody. And that feedback is critical for growth and development. So making sure people are spending the right amount of time in a different environment, because there's not two people. There's not the work person and the home person. You really want them to do the work that is none of our business. That's, you'll see things that are issues that are something rooted in someone's childhood or whatever else happened, but it's not our business. So we can't dive in there. We have to give people the time away and make sure they have a healthy, balanced life so they hear and learn and become better humans as we all need to be.
That's such the antithesis of the Silicon Valley model, right? Where everybody's chasing after, we're going to be the next unicorn. So this is our time to like put everything we have into the company, and life outside of that will come.
Well, I did a visit. I won't say to who. They're a very well-known organization. They have probably the perfect, whatever one would call it. In fact, the books are written about how perfect their environment is. It's all playful. It's all fun. They put everything into the work environment. And I did a tour and I asked the person who was a project manager, I said, you're not really managing projects. You're managing people and you're trying to squeeze the juice out of them right to the point of breaking. And you're keeping them here on purpose. You're making this their life. And you're basically killing these creatives, but not yet killing. So near death. And like, that's exactly what we're doing. And their product is great, but their people are miserable. And they're just not caring for the lives of the people, which is, even as I've developed strong players and we take them into these other environments to meet people, they're like, oh no, they're going to steal your people. I'm like, they're not, because they can't compete on the life side. They can offer people a lot of money and try and draw them away, but some every now and again do that, but they're usually miserable after and say they miss being in a healthy environment and they don't get to grow, because it's kind of a philosophy about how you get work done. Is the job to get work done? If the job's to get work done, then you use people to get the job done. But if you think my job is to take these people and to help create an environment where they grow, the job becomes the tool that you use to help them grow. And then what happens is that allows them opportunity. So you actually choose how to give people different work based on what they need to grow, as opposed to what you need to get done. And so they don't ever feel that use feeling. They feel a part of the process and they know that you're interested in them. And that's really what creates a fruitful environment where people feel free to help and to add to the environment.
It's focusing on the people is what I'm taking away, and making sure that there's a good work-life balance. Because in the end, we don't work to work. We work to have a better life. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, I have some managers will say, or I'll go to others that will come to me and say, can I talk to your employee? I'm like, why are you talking to me? I hope I'm a good enough boss that they'll tell me, but that's really up to them. I don't own those people. This idea that we somehow own people who work for us is ridiculous. And my competition doesn't call me to ask to talk to them. They are completely free to go whenever they want, to go do something else. And we've encouraged people away because they have bigger, better things to do somewhere else. And we can't serve that need in their life. But at the same time, a lot of people have stayed. I have a large group who have been with me over 15 years. And a lot of them millennials who I was told were going to jump every 2 years. And they just did it.
Well, that's a testament to what you're doing. And again, kind of a either contrarian point of view or busting a myth, something in that world, which is the next one here too. And you said that corporate innovation kills what it doesn't invent. What did you mean by that?
I don't know that I really believe in corporate innovation, but that's basically the company. So we have a corporate group and we have had different groups and we've tried to embed things. But if the things have to go into a business, it doesn't really work. So we've had to find models of ownership, because it's really black and white with people. If you didn't invent it and you are an inventor, you're going to find something wrong with it. You're not going to support it. Particularly in the renewable space, I took a group of people who remained in a business unit, came into my facility and gave them freedom to innovate and said, okay, you guys, do whatever you like, but take renewables and cut the cost in half. Find a way to cut the cost in half. And they tried lots of things. And the main thing was, show me failures. Tell me that you're failing all the time. I want to hear that. And if you can make it fail, then we have a business, And then when we did get a couple of things that really made sense after trying lots of things, we brought in the manufacturing people beside them and kind of let it transfer so that it was owned fully by that business. And that was able to then be taken back into the business. It doesn't have that natural rejection that goes on with corporate groups. It's the number one thing large companies struggle with, is how do you innovate? And they try all sorts of things. They go to outside groups. Yeah, when we bring it in, they kill it. It dies. It's a human behavior that you just have to understand and work with. How do we successfully do this and make things work? And so, yeah, I mean, we do have a few businesses that are just people going, I'd like to do this. And you go, okay, well, here's your window. Give it a shot, see what you can do. Those sometimes become businesses. Sometimes they don't. Our company, it's very simple. Like, we talk to each other in very simple terms. I once had a company trying to do some software work, and I found two guys working on a PowerPoint. I'm like, what are you doing? They said, well, we're working on a PowerPoint. Oh, no, okay. What for? And they said, for you. For me to do what? Well, to talk to your boss. And I'm like, this would be the first PowerPoint I use to talk to my boss. And I've asked millions before and if it doesn't make sense in my gut and I can't explain it very quickly, then we're not doing it. If you have to use lots of slides to explain something, then it's either too complicated or not understandable as a business idea. And people don't understand that. They often think, it's the fault of the person who's doing the review and rejects your idea. It's like, no, your idea better make simple sense. And that it's really being in a trust environment. Do you have a history where you're doing pretty good when you take gut choices? So
You just landed on something there, and you said being in a trust environment. And trust is not something that is just important internally. It's important externally. And in fact, I call it the trust epidemic. I mean, all you got to do is you just go to the last LinkedIn Edelman Trust Barometer and look. And Europe has been on a trust decline for decades. The US, even steeper, decades. And I think it was 61% of 32,000 respondents, 61% said that they think that we as selling organizations are intentionally misleading them. Intentionally.
Selling has become a dirty word. So, you have to learn. I've had people say, I had a time I was a CSO, so I had sales as my responsibility, and people would vehemently argue that is not what I do. Hopefully it's not, because it's same as my nonprofit. My nonprofit, the opening thing we do with every company we work with is we don't want your money. And they're listening. And in the end of the journey, what we want is it's an anti-trafficking group. So what we want is their kids not to be trafficked. They're fully on board with that. Let's do some stuff. And ultimately they do give us money. Money's a byproduct to what we do, but it is a trust relationship where we're aligned completely. And so, I think it's interesting because I've done lots of really big deals over the years, and they've all been based on taking people down a road of trust. Is how do you prove, that we're going to do the right thing, or when we do the wrong thing, it hurts us as much as it hurts you. And people will stick with that. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be a reasonable part of the relationship.
It's interesting because it's not something that comes up regularly. I mean, there's the Gartner trusted advisor. Like we know we have to not be a salesperson. We got to be something else. But this has manifested itself in the fact that we're no longer in control of our sales pipeline the way that we used to be. Like literally, buyers don't even want to talk to us until the very end. And they've already got their top one or two in their mind. Their preference is already set. So it's interesting with your CTO, CSO, CMO hat on.
Now there's three. See,
now there's three. Yes.
Three-letter acronym.
But what do we do about this? Because this isn't an issue, right? Where we just sit back and say, let's just do the same old thing.
I watch people who do really big deals. We just brought a good friend of mine in to help one of our businesses. And it's really hard for people to understand that when you go into sell, which is your job, you're there to sell, to think you're not. You're not there to sell. The sale will happen, but your first thing is relationship and trust. Is like, do people want to be with you? I mean, we have courtside basketball tickets, and one of the guys said to me, I can't get this large company to come because of their policy. So, well, who are you trying to get to go? And he told me, and I said, okay, watch this. So I invite him and we go to the game, and he was like, how's that possible? Their policy is something they're using to not be with you because you're not being fun. Like you're talking work. It's not what they want. And especially big, long deals you do with people. You're talking about being around them for a long time, and they're really choosing partners they want to be with. And that's trust, but that's also enjoying being with them, caring about people, having integrity. Integrity is not a dial. If you're working on your integrity, you've already failed. It needs to be a solid part of who you are. And that's really what hurts people, is when people think I'm trying to work on my integrity. I'm trying to work on being more authentic, because like those are things you are and can be really powerful. But it's also feeling that responsibility for the person you're working with, where I'm going to help them, do what they need to do. I'm going to understand their problems. I'm going to bring solutions to them. that they're interested in, and own when it's paid that I've created or my company has created. Or so it's really hard, but especially it's hard to go on their side of the table and fully understand. And particularly if they're upset at you, which is a great place to be, but most people think is terrible. Like, they're being upset and communicating upset is really good because they haven't given up on you. Otherwise, they would ignore you and cut you off. And also, people will multiply being upset not because of you. It's because of something that happened to them in the past or has continued to happen for years, and you're triggering a lack of trust or whatever it would be. And so it's being calm in the middle of that environment and knowing they're willing to talk to you because they actually believe you can fix it. They want you to fix this thing. So that's a lot of, having that kind of calm and being strategic enough, because there's an intensity in selling that people carry with them and is not pleasant because you're trying to get to a deal as fast as possible. If people do that, it just doesn't work. I mean, it can work. There's plenty of people do it. I've seen a lot of miserable human beings trying to sell, and all I can feel is their misery. And like, it's the balance of life is so important to have a good, to be in a good place so that people are attracted to that and want to work with you. It's amazing how many people try different techniques and don't read the room really well, because the best of selling is understanding people. And that includes yourself, which most people don't want to do that work. I ran a sales leadership class and a lot of people were moved, but the best part was the families, the kids, the wives, the husbands, and the employees and the peers and the bosses who all went, what did you do to them? Because they came out different people. And it's just waking people up, waking them up to who they are, how their life is, and how they come across. And the more balance they have in their life, the more successful they are. Some would come in and are wildly successful at selling, but were terrible with their families. They were going to lose them. And so it's not worth it. So if you can balance that out, suddenly everyone likes being around that person nobody liked being around. And they were just closing deals, but big deals, but they're happy at the end. And that's the secret, is it's not mutually exclusive to be good at selling and to be a balanced human being.
It's interesting because in a very good way, I almost feel like I'm on the therapist couch here.
Well, some of the guys actually who went through that course would come back and say, I need to go to church again. Now, these are guys who don't go to church. They're just like, there's something wholesome and good that I lost between the last year that I was on this course. Like, I need that balancing and grounding. Because people just work without knowing how they're doing. And if you don't know how you're doing, everyone else does know how you're doing. People can feel whatever's going on. And so it's learning to be a lot more in touch with that. But it is caring for yourself. It is a therapeutic thing that you need to understand, especially when you get emotional about things. There's something else going on. And sometimes people are doing sales who just shouldn't be doing it. There's many, marketing particularly, because I learned I'm not like most CMOs. CMOs are like, they last 2 years in a job. And they talk about things that are so they're signs that no one trusts you. So they'll all talk about their performance based on metrics. And I'm like, if you're in the metrics conversation, you're in the wrong conversation. It immediately says they don't trust you and they need proof that you're okay. So if you knew the business, they will trust you, and the main thing is to get to know the business, understand the language, understand the people, care about the things in there, and then develop your plan and your strategy of how to execute it. But people ask me all the time, you want more metrics to keep your job? I'm like, no, not really. Thanks. We're pushing and leading in the space and creating tools, but pretending that marketing is actually sales is just a weird conversation. The two are married, but it's not. Job is different.
And that's good advice, whether you're a CMO, whether you're a chief people officer, whether you're a chief technology officer, is understanding the business itself.
And I was going to say, when I've spoken at CMO conferences, the highest majority of people say, I am questioning my job and my life right now at the end of the talk. So they're probably the most unhappy people. It's because they're living in this world where they're going to last a couple, 2-3 years, and then they're going to kick them out because they expected something they're not delivering. because they're wanting magic from marketing, which doesn't happen, you know?
Yeah. No, CMOs, a good percentage of them feel like they have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
They feel like they are looked upon as a support department as good as their last lead that they've created, that they don't have a seat at the table.
Right. I mean, I've been on the leadership team, but I've also been in the belly of the beast. I've kind of lived the life of the equipment and the systems, and I've been very connected to the technical community. I do think that's the secret. I always tell people, if you want to take people outside of the box, please go in the box first. Know the language of the box, because you can't take someone somewhere if you don't know where they are. You have to get in, you have to steep yourself in it before you're even qualified to say anything.
I like that. I'm writing it down. So here's the most important question, because we've covered a lot of territory here, but our poor human brains, we can only retain about 2 or 3 things at a time.
Now,
If you had the opportunity for the audience of C-suite executives that are going to be listening into this conversation, what is the one most important takeaway that you want to make sure that they have from our conversation?
I think find your allies in life and let them tell you things that you don't really want them to tell you. Find people who will tell you the truth about you and care for you more than you, because you're actually gonna burn yourself out easily in this. The load of the job is intense. And so when you function under that load, you're not sleeping, you're not thinking, your brain is not at its best. That psychological positioning of I'm going to be okay, I was made for this job, that comes from really good friends around you, asking hard questions, caring about your balance, getting you to being okay with who you are. I started, I guess, 14 years now, I've been in a C-suite job, but my first day, I threw out my desk and I put in comfortable chairs, and they're all like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, what are you doing? Do you think you work at a computer now? Or do you think you talk to people for a living?" And it freaked them out. But I'm like, this is where our work happens. And I want it to be comfortable and open. And I want people to be welcome, and talking needs to be the majority of what we do. But here I am, very different to the rest of the crowd, so I think it worked out okay, but it definitely, knowing who you are and being who you are, not being afraid of that, it really takes good people around you talking to you and helping you work through stuff. So I would say a few good people who care about you more than you care about yourself is really helpful.
Here's one thing that I'll say is the mission of this podcast is to get different perspectives, right, from C-suite executives. And we can all gain from those insights and years of experience. And that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were amazing today. Thank you, David. I'd love to have you back on the podcast at some point, because there's too many layers that we didn't even get into today.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what I do. And it took me maybe 6 months to learn to love what I do, but in this type of role, but I really enjoy it. I enjoy being where I am. And I think change has to happen for me. So I'm constantly creating trouble and find a way to make that okay with everybody. So different, that's for sure.
Well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you again for coming on. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.